Hey everybody, Jeff here. So today I wanted to talk about why I love Capture One and why I prefer to work with Capture One in my workflow as opposed to, say, some users who prefer Adobe Lightroom. Now, I will say sort of my caveat to this is some of this is what you're used to. I've been using Capture One since around 2003, so for quite a while. And I think I'm just used to the workflow of Capture One. It's easy to me, it's intuitive. Other people, I think if I had learned on Adobe Lightroom first, for sure I would be used to that and I might be more resistant to learn Capture One because I'm used to something else. But I started with Capture One, and then when I have looked at Lightroom, I see some of the things that it can do, but I also see some of the things that it cannot do. And that's what I'm going to focus on in this video. Top 10 things that I love about Capture One that are, I think, better than Adobe Lightroom. And some of you may disagree out there. That's fine. You can feel free to comment away down below. We'll get back to you on that. But these are some features that Capture One has that I use in my workflow as a photographer that are critical to the sort of the workflow of a commercial photographer that you just aren't going to get with Lightroom. So first off, let me say that as well, it's kind of like two different photographers in a way. There's the photographer that runs around with a camera and you have a card in the camera and you're taking pictures of the card, say your typical wedding photographer. You're not tethered to a computer, you're shooting everything, tons and tons of images to cards, and then you need to later dump those images, append keywords and metadata to them and process them and export them. It's probably a really good kind of photographer to use Lightroom. Or a nature photographer who's not tethering. But if you're a photographer that has clients on set, it's a horrible experience for the client to have to do any kind of critical assessment on a 2-inch by 3-inch screen on the back of your camera. It's obnoxious. There's stylists that need to see it. There's clients, art directors, creative directors, all these people that want to weigh in on an image. And if you're trying to show everybody off of the back of the camera, it's not really going to work out. Now, you can tether with Lightroom, however, it's not super robust, and I've found that it tends to get stuck a lot in Lightroom, and in some cases it just won't even connect, and it leaves you wondering, well, my camera's listed as being able to connect, but it's not connecting. What's the deal? So there's a lot of issues and bugs that I'm hoping Adobe will work out in time to be able to, I don't know, maybe even compete with Capture One on some of these things. But right now we're going to focus on what it can do. So number 10. Is an easy to understand sessions workflow. So rather than shooting like a million shots to a card and then dumping all those into a program and then having to sift through them, sort of the workflow with Capture One is about shooting some images, culling through them, getting rid of the duds, being able to say, yeah, these are no good for my purposes, I'm just going to delete them, throw them in the trash, and really focus in on the images that are the hero shots. And that's where Capture One, tends to excel, I think, is your ability to, kind of cull through the images, tag them, star them, apply metadata, keywords, and things like that, but be working in a sessions workflow. Typically, my jobs, I'll organize them on a hard drive where it's a, year, month, day, and then some sort of descriptor for my folder, and I can find that information back on my hard drives. If a client needs a particular file from me, I can find out the date of the job, find it on my hard drive, and open up that whole session and see that whole job again. So let's dive in and take a look at what some of this looks like. I'm going to go ahead and open up Capture One here, and we're going to start a new session. Looking good, so new session right here. And I'm going to put it in my folder on my desktop here for now called Capture One Sessions. And today's date is the 28th of March. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this untitled session bit. And I'll just call this C1 Pro. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what this does is it places a folder in my Sessions folder. And let me show you what that looks like here. Capture One Sessions, and here it is. Here's this folder. Inside this folder are a number of other folders. And it's really easy to see. This is the session file. If I were to double click this, if Capture One wasn't open, it would open up the program for me. And then all of my raw shots, as I'm tethered to the machine, populate into this capture folder. When I process an image out as a TIFF or a PSD or a JPEG, whatever my needs are, I can designate it to go into this output folder. It'll go there by default. I can also send it to other areas on the machine, to other hard drives if I need to or what have you. If I have specific selects that I want to sort of call out into a different selects folder, I can use the selects folder for that and output images to there. And the nice part is as I'm calling through images in the program and I'm dumping the duds, they don't delete permanently off of my hard drive until I empty the trash. And that would be this folder here. Whenever I delete something out of the program, it pops into this trash can. It moves it out of the capture folder and pops it into the trash folder. So if for some reason I'm on a shoot and I inadvertently delete a file that I then realize later, oh, I need that file, I can go back into the trash can, I can dumpster dive, get that file, bring it back to the capture folder, and I'm safe. It's only when I go to empty what the contents of this folder, that's when I've really truly deleted the files off of the machine. So I just have to know when I'm doing that and be very deliberate about that particular maneuver. So that's my number 10, is the easy sessions workflow, kind of easy to understand where the images are going, where they're landing. Okay, favorite thing number 9. Is that 9? Yeah, that's 9. Capture One also has the ability to have some flexibility to the way that you organize the naming conventions. In many cases, I'm working on set and there will be some specific naming conventions that a client has for the types of shots we're doing. In our case, we're going to be shooting 3 different outfits. We're going to be doing a sort of what they are calling the boho casual. There's going to be a koi rayon outfit and a velvet luxe. So those are the 3 names. Now, in some workflows, I can certainly come right up here to my naming convention, and I can say, boho, casual, and click like so, connect my camera and shoot, and all of the raw files get appended with that name, which keeps the organization, very smooth. Instead of having like just the camera names where it's like, 478AK21 dot, raw file. It's, instead, I can append it with the actual name for whatever I'm shooting, which is really helpful for my clients. This would be one workflow, and then I'd end up with all my images in the browser off to the right here on this side, and they'd have the different names, and then I'd have to kind of cull them from there. Some clients have, different needs, and I can come up here to my library tab, and here I can navigate on the drive itself through the library function to the folder I'm shooting to, and I can come in and I can change things. I can call this, well, maybe they want it called raws, right? And that's where all the raw files are going to go. And in here, maybe this is where they want all their high-res files to live, so we'll say, in this case, we'll make some TIFFs. And we'll say, yes, go ahead. And so it changes that to TIFFs nicely. And maybe we want another folder in here. We'll say, let's get a new folder in here. And this will be where we can process some specific JPEGs, low res. So we have these different files in here. Now what's nice is, when I would go to upload this sort of set to the client, they would be wanting the RAWs, the JPEGs, and the processed out TIFFs, those 3 folders. And instead of just dumping all the files into those folders, I can separate them out even further. I can come into the RAWs, and I can say new folder, and I can call this boho casual. That's their product here. And I can say create, and I can do the same thing here, the JPEGs. New folder, boho casual. I'm going to go ahead and just copy that. Click create. And I can come down here to the TIFFs and do the same thing. New folder, boho casual, create. And that way, at the end of the job, I'll have these various folders. I'll have the boho casual, and then I'll have another folder that will be the koi rayon, and another folder that will be the velvet luxe, the different looks that this particular client has. And it's nice because then I can load the JPEG, RAW, and TIFFs folders, and everything's already organized for them. And in the program, I can say, okay, output my TIFFs to that specific shot name TIFF folder. Output my JPEGs to that specific name job folder. When I dump the whole project to their server, everything's already organized, and they know where to go to find the JPEG, where to go to find the TIFF, where to go to find the RAW. It's another workflow, and once you get this sort of thing set up, it can be really nice for your clients if they're on this sort of workflow, rather than just having like all the images dumped into one folder and then they have to kind of try to find it from there. All right, favorite thing number 8, Capture One Pro. God, I love this program. So now we're getting down to it. We got our session workflow set up, number 10. We've got some flexibility to how we're going to organize the files as we're shooting. We're going to make sure that in our naming convention that we, tag the name of what we're working on. So that's in a workflow. I'm always like, okay, finding out from the client or the art director or the producer, is there a shot list? So I can get that shot list. If it's digital, it's great. I can just copy the name of the actual shot right in here, just cut and paste it over. Sometimes I have to type it in. Just depends on what's happening. But in this case, we're going to shoot some boho casual. And it's so great. I use my tether tools cable here. I connect it to my camera. I turn the camera on. Bing, bing, bing. It turns on for me. We're ready to go. I get my ProPhoto trigger happening here. And this is really what this program is about, is I can shoot tons and tons and tons of files to it and keep things really organized on their way into the program so that later when I go to dump this whole session to a Capture One catalog, everything's nice and organized for me. I don't have to worry about that. So long as I've dumped out all the duds, gotten rid of those, and sort of take care of the housekeeping as far as the bad files and marking the good files and things like that. So let's get to shooting. So it's nice because the images populate over here on the right-hand side, and I can scroll through them, checking out some of the different poses, some of the different looks. If you can. Oh yeah, that's good right there. And then just let that right hand drop casually to your side. So there you go. We've got a set of images here, different looks, nice and organized for us, which is great. We've got in this particular product look, this setup that we have for Quinn, the Velvet Luxe. We can come to our library. We can look in the Koi Rayon, this different look, in the Boho Casual. And so this sort of setup, it's beautiful. I can shoot, and I'm just like pumping these 50 megapixel shots right into the program, and it doesn't fail on me. Very rarely will there be a hang up or a crash. Often it's usually because of the operating system on the computer, I've noticed. Usually just restarting the computer fixes most of those problems. But yeah, it's a super robust tethering software platform. Outside of tethering, I think the main thing is, with this video that I'm trying to get across, is that all the things that Lightroom can do, Capture One can do. Even if you're shooting to card and dumping your images and working in that sort of workflow, Capture One can do that too. It's not just for tethering. I could connect a card reader to this computer and import images in just like you do in Lightroom. I can set up a catalog workflow just like in Lightroom and work with it that way. But some of these other features are things that Capture One can do that Lightroom cannot. So let's go down to the studio and dive a little deeper into this software program. Okay, reason number 7. Why I love Capture One over the other products. Token processing. So here's a scenario where we've done a photo shoot here. We have a few different looks. We sit down with the art director, and a lot of art directors now are familiar with this program, and so they often can kind of come in and tag their own shots. And in this case, the art director has come in and tagged the ones that they really love, green, and the maybe shots, red. You can see here a green tagged shot, and here's a red tagged shot. And what they need is they want them processed out, but they want a way to be able to reference that. It would be, fairly arduous of a task if I have, 100 of these shots that I have to go through, and they've marked all of these green and red based upon, their ones they really want, and the other ones that they maybe need other people's, other art directors, the creative director's input, things like that. Kind of
sort of safety net shots, basically, are these red ones. But, the file name itself, it would be arduous if I had to go in and actually append on each individual shot name, something, an indicator that this was a maybe shot, and that the other ones were the superheroes. But, with the tagging process of this camera label of green and red, it's really nice because I can actually process these out into my JPEG folder and send them individually to a red and a green folder, so that then when I hand those JPEGs over, they can open up the ones that were green and know, oh, those are the ones that are the superheroes, and here are the other maybe shots. So let's take a look at how that works. You see I've set up my process recipe here. I'm going to just pump out some JPEGs in sRGB, 300 pixel JPEGs, that's fine. Down here in my location, I'm going to go choose the folder, and I had set up in my Capture One sessions here in C1 Pro, the JPEG raw selects. I'm going to go into my JPEG folder. Here's my boho casual, and I'm going to say that's where I want to send this, to the boho casual. It's the boho casual line here, and that's where we're sending. Now this is the great part. It's down here in this subfolder. Let me just collapse that so you can see here. I have the ability to hit in the subfolder category, this little ellipse. And these are the tokens that I can use, these little bits down here. So I can organize the output of my imagery based upon a lot of different things here. And in this case, I want to base it on color tag. So I'm bringing the color tag token up into this little format area so that when I click OK and I go ahead and I select all these shots here, and these are the ones that the client wants, and I click process, it's going to send out all these high-res JPEGs out of the program and separate my green tagged items from my red tagged items. It's pretty cool. So now when we jump into that JPEG folder of this particular project, here's our JPEG folder, here's our boho casual folder, I open it up, look, now we have all of the green processed files in a green folder. There they are, those are all the ones. That way we can tell when we hand this over to the art director, the one that says green are the heroes that you chose, and the red folder are the maybes that you wanted for later. That is really an excellent feature that Capture One figured out. To be able to organize on the fly without having to go in and give special names to anything, you can organize them immediately into their own separate folders. Reason number 6, why I love Capture One. Batch exporting of images. So let's say, in some scenarios I might be working in a workflow that I showed earlier where you have a raw folder, a TIFF folder, a JPEG folder. Inside of those are the per shot name folders. That's one workflow you could adhere to. But let's say the art director says, here are my favorites, here are the selects that I want. Can we get TIFFs, high-res TIFFs and JPEGs right away of these? I don't necessarily, in that scenario, want to be dealing with the multiple folder thing. I just want to get them into the selects folder. But it's nice that I don't, in Lightroom, you have to wait for one process to complete, set up the TIFF parameters, export those out, might take a little while, then set up the JPEG parameters. But in Capture One, I can come here to the process recipes and set up my JPEG parameters, and I can set up my TIFF parameters. I can have them both with the check mark, so they're enabled for the output. And then when I come down to the output location, I can come and I can choose that folder. And in this case, I can come into the selects folder and I can choose, I'm sending these are the select heroes they need right away. Bim, bam, boom, I can hit process, and we'll see how long it takes. It's saying about 18 seconds. In this way, in a scenario where I'm not necessarily needing to send TIFFs to one folder, JPEGs to another, they just need both right now, I can send them into the selects folder in one batch process, as opposed to having to wait for one action, the TIFF action, and then turn around and have to wait for the JPEGs to get sent through. This allows me to quickly and easily just select the two process recipes that I'm after. It sends them all into the selects folder here, as you can see. And now I've got my high-res files and my TIFF files all in one spot. Reason number 5, why I love Capture One. Crop to path. This is relatively new. It's been around for a few different versions now at the time of this video. But it's excellent. There's many times where working on set, we have a particular crop that we're working with. But the thing is that the client doesn't want necessarily that file to be cropped when it's delivered. They want the uncropped version in case they need room for bleed, things like that. And this gives us that ability, which is pretty nice. So I have this image here, just a fun image of my dog Lola running out and on our hike out to a hot spring, a natural hot spring. And I can come here and I can say, oh, let's pull up crop 8 by 11. That sounds good. And I'll go ahead and get a crop going, figure out what sort of crop I want. Maybe something like this is nice. Yeah, that's a pleasing crop. And I can preview that crop. So it temporarily crops the image so that now I can see my crop. But when I go to export this image out of the program, or as Capture One calls it, to process the image out, it may respect this crop and crop the file, and then I end up delivering this cropped file. But if my client wants the uncropped file, in this case, I'm going to choose the parameter of setting up a PSD, a Photoshop document, in the pixel resolution and color space, and I'm going to open it, in this case, automatically with Photoshop, which is a nice feature. But under this adjustments here, under crop, I'm going to tell it crop to path. And now watch what happens when I go to develop this file. We'll hit process, and it processes, boom, 33 megabyte file. It opens up the image, and notice it's uncropped. This is an uncropped image, which is very handy because if the image is going to some sort of publication and they need room for bleed around it, and you give them the full cropped image, then they don't have that room around it. But as the image is delivered, they may need a reference for what crop you want on it. And when you come to the paths here, you'll see that there's a Capture One crop. And if I control click, you can see as it activates that pen path essentially into a selection, that's the intended crop. So it gives them a reference point of what the photographer wanted out of a crop for the image. That's a pretty cool feature. All right, reason number 4 why I prefer Capture One, the overlay utility. So many times when I'm working on set with art directors, clients, where we're shooting specifically to a publication that has text or some sort of graphic bug on it. And the ability to preview where that text or graphic is going to go is pretty key to when we're designing the photograph, just to make sure there aren't any tangent lines and kind of designing elements in to leave some room for that type. So in this case, I can come into the program. We have this shot of this cupcake here. And I can come and I can choose that file. I'm going to navigate over to my spot where I have this overlay that has been created. And there it is. So here's the overlay in there. And I'm going to scale it up a little bit. And I'm going to move it over, drop my text in that area. That's about where the art director would like it. And again, they want like an 8 by 11 kind of crop on this. 8.5 by 11 is the publication size. And boom, just like that, we're able to get this graphic in there. And it's just temporary so that we can see generally where the title of this particular publication is going to land in the design of the photograph. This feature is not only handy for graphics, but in scenarios where you're shooting multiple plates for Photoshop uses. Maybe you're moving one piece of furniture from here to over there and you want to see where it lines up. You can load a previous JPEG in as an overlay and adjust the opacity down to kind of see where things, like a double image, see where things are lining up. So it's a fantastic feature. It's used very frequently on set. It's one of my favorite features, comes up all the time, and very frequently I'll make sure that if I'm working with some sort of publication that I get their publication graphics from them so that I can create overlays ahead of time. And that way when we're on set and if the question comes up, oh, how is this going to work with the cover, I can just simply load up their cover graphic right on the spot. And it's, can be kind of an impressive thing. We're like, wow, okay, well, now we can see. Okay, reason number 3, Capture One Pro, luminance masking. This is fairly new to the newest versions of Capture One. And I will say that Lightroom does have a certain amount of luminance masking, but not near the amount of control that we have in Capture One. You can see here in this image of J.W. Teller. He's a local country musician. I want to do some sort of split toning work on him, and I can use some Luma range here to do so. You'll see in the adjustments here, I have these abilities to create adjustment layers, which is nice. And I can come in here and I can hit this plus sign and choose a new filled layer. And I'm going to go ahead and toggle the mask on, always display mask, and it'll fill it with this ruby color, indicating the whole thing is selected right now. And I'm going to come into the Luma range, and as I toggle the Luma range over, you can see it selects and deselects based upon where I'm dragging this information, like so. And if I go to invert the range, you can see now I've got a selection of him. And what I'm looking for is to get the red. You can see it's appearing in the upper left-hand corner here on my background. I want the effect that I'm going to apply to him to not land onto that bluish toned background, that sort of light gray. I want it really to just happen to him here. So I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments there, and as I drag these out, I can feather some of that information, as I see there. And then I'm still going to need to come in and manipulate parts of this mask. I'll show you here. I'm going to go ahead and click Apply, and then I'm going to come over here to this little toggle, and I'm going to choose to rasterize this particular mask, which will allow me to manipulate it a little bit further, which will be nice. I'm going to display this mask as a grayscale, so that's helpful. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and it allows me to come in here and make some adjustments to this mask. I'm just going to kind of be careful of the edge here, and it's nice because Control or Command Z work in this program as well. And I'm basically creating this mask so that I can let this effect be applied to him and not the background. And it's, kind of like Photoshop Light, really. But it allows you kind of on the fly to do a certain amount of image editing like this without having to go in and make complicated selections in Photoshop, which is pretty cool. So that's feeling pretty good. I'll let some of that kind of feather off there. Sort of a little heavy-handed there. Okay, looking good. I'll take a smaller brush along the edge here. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and toggle back out of my grayscale mask. And I'll choose only display the mask. So the mask is active, but it's only going to display when I'm actually painting and things like that. And this is where I can come in and I can choose some different features. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a tool here, and it's going to be my color balance. And I'm going to choose my shadows, and I'm going to drop the shadows here into sort of teal. Look, we're going to do the teal orange here. Teal shadows and kind of orange highlights like so. And you can see I can hold the Alt key and depress this and see a before, after, just like so. And you'll notice that this effect is not being applied to that gray background. It's only being applied to him. Another great little added bonus I'm going to throw in here is we have the ability to make other versions. Maybe I'm making this version and I like it enough, but I want to be able to make some other changes. So getting a duplicate of him in here, I can right-click and I can choose this item here called New Variant. And it brings up this variant, it strips out the work that was done on it, shows me the original raw file, which then gives me the ability, should I, say, want to do some other maneuvers here. Like I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to collapse color balance. I'm going to add a tool in here, and I'm going to take it to black and white, and I'm going to enable it. And from here, I can do some work on him with some sliders. So, and maybe I can make it more contrasty and Maybe take the exposure down a hair. Maybe I want it to look more like that. And maybe I want to bring my highlight slider up a bit. And so now I have a couple different versions. I have this one that I've color graded with the sort of teal orange thing, and doing it with a luminance mask, I've been able to apply this so it's only affecting him, it's not affecting the background. And then if I want a different version altogether, I can then create a variant, and there we go. We have another version. I could process those two out, and I have a couple different versions of the same shot, different ways of looking at it. That's pretty cool. Reason number 2, Capture One Pro, the color editor. You've probably heard this before, different people saying, oh, the raw processing is much better than Lightroom, things like that. That's cool. You know, again, like I've said before, you see somebody's image in the end, you're not going to know what program they used to process it. If it's a good image, it's a good image, and that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter what camera you're using, doesn't matter what software you're using, it just matters whether the image is good. All of this is just workflow stuff, what you prefer, your preferences. But for me, I have found that the color editor in Capture One is for sure more accurate than Lightroom, in that I can come in and have adjustments over colors in certain areas that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do in a program like Lightroom. So let's take a look at this image here. This is an image that Forrest shot while he was in New Zealand. And I want to go and I want to adjust the color of just these flowers here without it affecting anything else. So I'm going to pop into my color editor, come down here to the color editor, and I'm going to come into the advanced mode, and I'm going to grab this little picker here, and I'm going to come in, I'm going to choose the color range that I'm after. So I'm after some of these blues and some of these magentas, like so, which now I've targeted this sort of range of colors that I'm looking to adjust, and as I toggle the hue slider in a different direction, you can see I can make changes to those colors. And on the fly, I can make adjustments to that range. If I widen my range too much, it starts to spill into the mountains in the background and the sky. But as I target that range down, it targets more of the magenta sort of flavored items down in the foreground. The fact that I can dial in and choose specific colors in my image and just have an effect on those without making a single selection, that's pretty cool. We look at another kind of image. That was a landscape. Here's a product shot where I want to do some color editing. Maybe this orange sort of highlight going on in the background, maybe I want to have an effect on that. So I can use my color picker in the advanced mode, and I can expand the range of that a ways. And I just want to be careful. I don't want to have too much of an effect on the label here, so I got to keep an eye on that. But I'm really wanting to change what's happening up there, the quality of the color of that light in the background. Maybe I want it to go a little bit more red, like this, to kind of help pick up some of the red that's happening on this front label. So they can hold the Option key on the Mac, click the little reset button, and it shows me before, after, before, after, before, after. There's a little bit of an effect happening down here on the cherry. I just have to keep an eye on that and be careful of that. You know, and that's one of those areas where, depending upon how critical things are, a product shot like this, it would be fairly critical that we not mess with the color of the product itself. But you can see that, you know, on the fly, if we're making, you know, specific changes to specific areas, we're doing this with the color editor without making any selections. That's a pretty powerful tool. Reason number 1, Photoshop integration. One of the things that I think frustrates so many of my students, frustrates me dealing with Lightroom, is that you want to take the image, make some adjustments. Maybe there's some things you want to remove, some retouching you want to do in Adobe Lightroom, and so then you send that image to Adobe Lightroom. And it sort of like couples it back to Lightroom. It says, or you want to send it to Adobe Photoshop, but it's kind of coupled back with Lightroom, knowing that you're going to do your work in Photoshop, you're going to hit save, and it's going to save it as a -edit file to differentiate it from your original. That's a nice feature. Now, the problem lies in that if you bring it back to Lightroom, you make some more slider adjustments, and then you want to take it again back to Photoshop for some reason. Maybe you forgot to clone something out. Lightroom then brings up this dialog where it makes you make a kind of a tough choice. Do you want to go back and edit the original with none of the Lightroom maneuvers, none of the Photoshop maneuvers? Do you want to go and dump the most recent Lightroom maneuvers and keep your Photoshop work? Or do you want to keep the Lightroom work and dump the Photoshop layers? And those are some tough choices. Me personally, I don't like making those kinds of choices. I would prefer to take my image to Photoshop and then send that image back to Capture One to keep it within that workflow. And for some strange reason, Phase 1 has this pretty dialed in. I'm hoping Adobe will kind of figure this out. I'm sure they will at some point, but right now, my number one reason is that I work with Photoshop a lot, and it's nice to be able to take an image from Capture One, send it into Photoshop, have a bunch of layers going on, get some work going, and be able to save it back into Capture One. If I need to take it back to Photoshop, it'll bring it back to Photoshop. I can continue to work on it, and it doesn't give me the dreaded dash edit, multiple dash edits that you will find if you're working in a workflow, taking images from Lightroom to Photoshop and back and forth again. Again, with Lightroom, really the key is that you want to make Photoshop your last stop. Really, you should be making Photoshop your last stop in general. But if you're looking to then get your retouched file back into the computer program for archiving, to get it into your catalog, whatnot, it integrates with Capture One really well. So let's take an image out. Got this image here of Ryan that we shot doing some high-speed sync out in the bright sun. Shot at 1/1000th of a second at f4 out in the bright sun using high-speed sync with some strobe. And I'm going to take this image and I'm going to send it to Photoshop and do a little bit of work on it. So I'm going to right-click on the image and I'm going to choose this Edit With, Adobe. And it asks me, okay, well, we're processing it out. How do you want to process it out? I'm going to say TIFF, PSD, either is fine. I'll just do an 8-bit for now, just for expediency. Click Open. And it's going to process out this file. It's still sort of linking it back to Capture One for me. And I'm going to do the work here. When I hit Save, it's going to send it back to Capture One for me. So I've done some real basic retouching with him. I kind of just did a little bit of styling of his jacket. To me, I felt like it kind of had this kind of funny shape to it. You can see here before. It's just looking a little weird and thin to me. I kind of gave him some bulkier arms and kind of filled it out a little bit. Just made the jacket look a little bit better here. And did a little bit of clone stamping on his face, just, blemishes, things like that. I'll take this further, of course, the other things I would do, but some basic retouching. And then I'm going to hit Control S, Command S, to save this image out so that I can take it back to Capture One. And you'll notice that now I have two here. I've got this CR2, my original RAW file, and I've got this Photoshop version right here, this PSD. I've already edited with it. So I've right-clicked on the original and said Edit With, and I hit Save, and it saved it. This would be sort of akin to the Lightroom -edit file. But let's say I come back here and I want to make some changes, and I come in and I decide, I'm going to make a little bit of some maneuvers to the exposure, darken the background down a bit, kick up my highlights a bit, come into the exposure, maybe with a little bit of contrast, touch of saturation, whatever it is I think I would want to be doing on an image. And I'm doing this to that PSD back here. It's like the Lightroom sliders, but Capture One. And I want to send it back to Photoshop. I've decided, I think I want to clone out that white snow that's in the background. I can come back to this image and I can say, right-click, Open with Adobe Photoshop. And there it is. And it has my layers intact. And if I decide, I want to come in and retouch out this snowbank that's back there. Let's do a quick job of it here. Like that. Get rid of that snowbank. 0, looking good, and I hit Command Save, like so. And I exit out of program. There it is. So now that has been updated. Here's my PSD back in Capture One, and instead of having a dash edit and then another dash edit for each time I take it to Photoshop, it just updates the file for me back here in Capture One. And if I wanted to open it up again in Photoshop, I can come back and again say open with Photoshop. And when it opens up, my layers are intact. There they are. The work is still there. That feature right there is amazing, and I really wish Adobe would get on it and figure out a way to integrate it so it's not this confusing mess of dash edits.
So if you like this video, hit that thumbs up. Haha, just kidding. Reason number 11. 11 reasons why Capture One has more features, it's more robust, is just the better software program, in my opinion. Again, if you're an Adobe Lightroom user, that's fine. I mean, the truth is, you guys, at the end of the day, when you look at the image, you're not going to be able to tell what program processed it. I can't look at an image and say, oh, that was definitely Capture One, or that was definitely Lightroom, or that was Adobe Camera Raw, or, you know, iPhoto. I mean, who knows what, you know, is going on with somebody's image. It kind of doesn't matter in the end. It's what works for you in your workflow. But all that being said, number 11, live view. So in a scenario like this, I'm doing like a down shot of a garment, and the ability to put my camera into a live view where it's opening the shutter and giving me kind of a video feed directly into the computer here allows me to come down and work with stylists, and we can see in a live view setting, if we were wanting to do some styling of a garment like this for a particular product shot, we have the ability to see immediately on set the effect of the maneuvers that we're making. And this feature comes in handy so many times on set, so many photo shoots that I've been on, worked many years with JCPenney and Gap, Mountain Hardware, and we would do these kinds of shots, lay down shots of garments, and working with styling and being able to kind of just get a sense of the shot from above with the camera up above. And then when we're ready to shoot, when we feel like we've got the garment, the product, the item that we're shooting, pretty well situated into a spot that we all agree that we like, we can shut down the live view. We can take the camera controls from the computer, the camera is up on this stand, back to my original settings, and we can fire off a shot. Nice. And that gives us kind of a baseline. We get a shot taken, and I can then start looking at things like, oh, well, now that it's being lit, I can start working with my strobe. I can start to minimize some of the shadows that I may see here. I can start working on the actual photography. But the live view gives us the ability between shots to bounce into live view, open up the shutter, and take a look at what the camera sees, because that's all that really matters. I don't want to have to get on a ladder and be looking through the camera in this scenario. It'd be a lot of up and down on the ladder. No need to do that. I can come to a window, click on live view, open my shutter up, slow my shutter speed down here, and you can see that helps to let us see a brighter exposure and work with the garment live on screen. It's awesome. So if you like this video, hit that thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, you can hit the thumbs down. Go down there and smash that subscribe button for me. Hit that little bell, ring it. It'll let you know when we got new videos. Thanks to Canon and thanks to B&H for providing some of the equipment to make this video possible. I hope you too can see what some of the features here that Capture One has and why certain photographers love using this program over other products. Thanks for watching.